It's the things that cause us the most grief that actually elevate us to places that we never imagined we'd be. We don't want to go through any grief-related event that we've dealt with. But the reality is, grief is tantamount to growth. Welcome back to another episode of the Grief Empowerment Theory. I'm your host, J. Lewis III, and today I want to have a conversation. I kind of want to circle back on the old topic I was talking about. It's called solo parenting. It's a term I made up to talk about a particular single parenting community, one that's almost literally ignored, but it's one of the biggest reasons for single parenting to exist. I've noticed through my research, there is big, uh, a big group of single parents related to divorce, and people talk about that all the time. And then when I was looking up the term solo parenting, I assumed that I would get a lot of information related to people losing their spouse or other situations. That wasn't the case at all. I ended up getting a lot of situations or a lot of information that referred to situations related to a spouse who is living maybe 3 or 4 states away, working in these different states, leaving one spouse to take care of the children. I I know my situation was interesting because when my wife died in 2016, I had 2 girls. At the time, they were 13 and 16. It takes a lot to raise some kids by yourself. And the reason why I came up with the term solo parenting was because there is no help. See, there are different levels of issues related to each particular single parenting group. Single parents due to divorce, they may have issues with dealing with their former spouse. You know, there may be parenting time issues. Who gets Tommy on Thursday versus who gets him on Saturday, and that's a difficulty. And then, of course, you're dealing with the solo parent where their spouse is gone for maybe 3, 6 months at a time. And it could be a military situation or, from deployment, or they just may work several states away. And of course, that spouse is dealing with everything. But it's different. Both her situations are different. Because in the divorce situation, you can co-parent in some way, shape, or form. And if you can't, then you have legal ramifications to address some things. Financial components for a portion of people. There is a situation that can be worked out in the court system where one spouse is making child support payments. So those things are covered. In a solo parent situation where the parent works a few states away, what they know is at some point that other spouse, significant other, they're coming home. You're going to be able to put your eyes on that person. Now, in a solo parenting situation, you can't, the only time you're putting eyes on that person is through a picture. You can't ask them for help because you don't have the ability to go to the graveyard to ask them for assistance. And it could be other situations too, not just death. For instance, incarceration, that's a big thing. There are, for instance, over 83% of African American males in the prison system are in the prison system rather. And that means that those men don't have the ability to connect with their families. And that leaves 83% of the women to be solo parents. That means that they're having to deal with everything on their own. They don't get any help because their spouse in the system. And they may get some help from in-laws or things like that. But there's nothing like your other half helping you with the situation. When my wife was alive, I remember, you know, we used to share responsibilities. We had a 50-50 type of thing going on. We had it when it came to dealing with daily chores and circumstance. Then we even had it when it came to disciplining the girls. It was interesting because me and my wife used to dub it the rock and the feather. I was the rock and my wife was the feather. I would come in hard, telling the girls about everything that they needed to do. And then my wife would come in and she would smooth everything over. She would talk to the girls about the reason why daddy put his foot down the way he did, things of that nature. See, that doesn't happen in the solo parenting circumstance. The parent that is alive, or the parent that is not incarcerated, or the parent that is not incapacitated, they're taking on a dual role. So now they are morphing into a 100% responsibility circumstance. They are what I call the chief cook and bottle washer because 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they are handling everything related to them, related to the children, even outside situations, schedules. They have to make sure that they are coordinating a schedule for themselves. If they're working, they got to manage their work schedule. And then they also have to manage their children's schedule. And whether it's school related functions, whether it's extracurricular, soccer, ballet, whatever it is, that parent has to make sure that they are creating time. Then there's an incredible financial component to the whole thing. For instance, when my wife passed, there was my wife was making $70,000 a year. So there was a $70,000 a year gap. Now here's the blessing for me. And next month, I'm actually going to do a panel discussion with a series of insurance experts to talk about this. But What I did was me and my wife, we invested in a a good insurance policy for life insurance. You know, a lot of jobs, a lot of people just rely on what the job gives them. You know, that $150,000 life insurance policy, which will cover your family for roughly 2 to 3 months. Think about it. If you have a family of three, you have three children and a spouse, and the only thing you have is $100,000 policy, you are saying that each person is worth $25,000 for 1 year. And the reality is, of that 25,000, 20 of it's going to be gone in the first 3 months. And the reality is because, one, when you're grieving, when you're mourning, you want to make sure you keep everybody in their relative lifestyle. So that means you're going to exhaust your resources to do so. See, these are things that solo parents have to take in consideration. And there are a lot of solo parents out here that don't have proper coverage. I was blessed. I worked in the insurance field, so I understood the importance. I made sacrifices. Me and my wife, we didn't go a lot of places because we had to pay for our plan. We weren't able to do a lot of things because we had to pay for our plan. And it was interesting because what's funny, a lot of people will look at you crazy because you can't do the things that they can do. When my wife died in 2016, and I was able to address that just in case situation. All of a sudden, I mean, a few other people that I knew that were really smart, they made that investment choice. They were older because age is affected by insurance. So you are paying a lot more. That's a whole different conversation. Next month, I'm actually going to have some experts on to talk about plan, prevent, defense. How all people are going to eventually pass. And when you're a spouse, when you have a spouse, that can happen. But that's a whole different conversation. Let me deal with this whole solo parenting thing right now. And the reason why I'm bringing it back up again is because tomorrow I'm having a panel discussion. And I have 6 incredible experts that some are experts through academia, and almost all of them are experts through practicality. They had some situation, some were the child of what I call that solo parent, where they had to watch their mother or their father raise them by themselves. Like I said, my daughter is actually going to be on that panel. She's an expert because she's gone through it, but she's now in law school, and her her whole thing is to talk about the choices that young adults can make. And I have a couple that's going to be on tomorrow's panel. They've written a book, and both of them lost their original spouses. One lost his spouse to COVID, and which was, let me tell you, that increased the amount of single parenting in 2021, 2022. It was big, a big reason for the explosion of single parenthood. But again, they 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 found each other after the loss. And in that book, they talk about how they had to navigate life as single parents, solo parents. And then they're also talking about how they were able to reconnect, how to create trust, and also how to get over the guilt aspect of stuff. You know, listen, you don't want to feel like you're cheating on your husband or your wife, even though they've passed away. Look, it's real. Then I have a sociologist that's coming on, and I also have a doctor who specializes in helping parents to navigate their children's stress, anxiety, grief. Um, Lastly, I have an LMFT, and her whole thing is understanding that people that go through this spouse type of situation when they lose that spouse. I mean, when you get married and that you there is a chemical connection in the brain. So when you meet someone and you fall in love, it's not just that emotional, spiritual thing. Doctors have talked about the fact that there are literally neural connections in the brains that occur when you meet that love of your life. And then how they're broken when that spouse leaves, when they die. Now, you have to reconnect. You have to, it takes you some time to deal with that whole thing. And again, that's where things like guilt come in. That's where things like shame come in. And you shouldn't feel guilty and you shouldn't be shameful. But again, our minds, you know, society at large makes us feel this way. That's a whole different story. My conversation right now is about why I want to talk about solo parenting. As I mentioned before, it's one of the leading causes for single parenting to happen. But at the same time, it's that one area that's not being discussed. It's very interesting because I've been doing some research, and you want to see and understand and wonder a lot of different things. Why nobody talks about this? Again, it goes back to that conversation I was talking about with the shame. People are ashamed of realizing that that person that they had is no more, and they don't want to keep talking about it because you know what? Everybody else has moved on. And unfortunately, you're not in the position because it's attached to you. Like I said, that brain connection, it's there. I mean, listen, I remember that I was hallucinating. I thought I was seeing him in crowds. I thought I was seeing her in all kinds of different places. Now I'm gonna put my glasses on because I, I found this article that was really interesting, and they talked about, first off, it's common. The article stated that roughly 80% of women are affected by this phenomenon, and about 15% of males. Obviously, I'm in that 15% category, but they termed it after death communication. And it's interesting because when you're in a solo parent circumstance, you are already feeling crazy because emotionally, mentally, you know, you lost the love of your life. I had to talk about this recently, and what's interesting about it is that a solo parent, whether it's a situation that was anticipated, such as cancer or something like that, or it was something like a car accident. Either way, within 1 second of your spouse passing, you're officially a solo parent. And your learning curve is so steep. I mean, I, when my wife died, I had to realize, like I said, I had to learn so many things quickly. I had to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to manage my schedule better. I had to learn how to manage their schedule. I had to learn how to make up this $70,000 hole. Now, like I said, I had a pretty high net worth policy. So it took care of me for a long period of time, that adjustment period. And that's something that I encourage people to understand, that there will be an adjustment period. It takes a long time. For me, when my wife died, it took me close to 2 years to reconfigure who I thought I was, to learn that, you know what, Jay is an individual entity now. Jay is no longer a couple. Your friends groups change. I mean, a lot of my friends groups were married couples. Well, when my wife died, that changed. And that's a part of solo parenting that plays on you emotionally and mentally. It's different than when you go through a divorce or a solo parenting situation, because these are connections of people that you assumed would always be your friend. And unfortunately, you outgrow each other. They're not being bad people. They're moving on because for them, it's not the same as when you were a couple. And for you, you're trying to hang on to a connection that is no longer. So, like I said, there's an emotional component that is extremely heavy because you're that person that now has to deal with not only managing the loss of your spouse, a person you never intended to lose. You're also managing the emotional and the mental components of your children. Because you got to remember, just like you lost the love of your life, they lost their parent. And children process loss differently because their brains are not fully formed yet in a lot of situations. You know, they have a hard time understanding this loss that they're dealing with. And in some situations, some children actually believe that they're responsible for the loss. And that's when you, as a parent, have to have a conversation on a level that the child can understand. How hard is that when you are having a challenge navigating your feelings? When you, this is a big reason. The what's interesting is the suicide rate amongst single parents is high because you are squeezed. The pressure is a lot. And sometimes sometimes parents they take a selfish approach. And when I say selfish approach, it's I'm not saying this mean. What I'm saying is, you know what? They've already lost their spouse and their children have already lost their parent. So, so now, instead of you thinking about your children, you end up thinking about your emotions and you may make a decision that's not the best course of action. And now that child or those children are missing both parents. We have to we have to learn to be incredibly strong because again, the the lexicon will state that, you know, you're supposed to get over it. You're supposed to manage. You're supposed to handle it. But inside, it's a challenge. It's incredibly difficult to be able to navigate the situation and to do it without having some type of resentment, some type of frustration. It only takes the smallest thing to set you off. And that's when you also have to understand how to maintain self control. Because now you have to take in consideration the the children, and your children are going to be very amped up because one, they're dealing with their emotions. They're having a challenging time because one spouse is not coming back and they miss that spouse. So again, the children may make the decision to act out because they're processing their emotions. But then that means that you, as the parent, have to learn how to navigate your circumstance. You're going to have to learn how to manage yourself, and at the same time, you're going to have to learn to manage their circumstances, their emotional impacts. You're going to have to realize that they just might do things that are against the grain of normalcy. So now instead of jumping on them, instead of being that rock, you got to figure out how to become the feather too, and talk to them about how to navigate through the emotional challenges that they're feeling and the mental challenges, and seek help where you can. And I know that there may be some financial issues that you have to look at. And but that what that means now is that you have to do some in-depth research. You have to reach out to different organizations, find out what they have. There may be some virtual circumstances that can be helpful to both you and your children. You can reach out to the community and find out if there are some community connection circumstances that you will be able to help work with your children with. Because the goal is to find out how you can find the resources that you need. And that's the reason why I'm doing tomorrow's panel. Tomorrow's panel is a way to be able to start with conversation, get this solo parenting concept more on the forefront of society. Now, once you start having the conversation, eh, more people are going to start coming out to say this is something that they're dealing with. And the more people that are impacted by this, combining with the discussion, will allow the eventual opportunity for resources, the eventual opportunity for more support. And this community truly needs it. Because, like I said, they are the chief cook and bottle washer all the time. So that means there's not much time for things like self care. There's no time to take it down a notch. If you're lucky, hey, you can take the kids to the grandparents' house, give yourself some time. But in some situations, that doesn't happen. As a matter of fact, and what it you would think it's common, but what is interesting is that in-laws sometimes they get so severely impacted by the loss that even when they look at you, it reminds them of what they lost. When they look at the children, it reminds them of what they lost. So, for instance, if you are married and you lost your wife's in-laws, they may change their thought processes of you and of your children. And they're not being mean at all. They have been hurt. They've been hurt by the loss. And when they see you or the children, it reminds them of what they've lost. So that might be a little difficult to be able to, you know, ask for assistance in that respect. Goes right back to the why that solo parent is severely impacted, because you have no one that you can go to for assistance. You don't have any help. It's all on you. And it's all on you all the time. So that means that you feel like you have to be on point 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you believe that if you're not, then something is going to go wrong. So now you have that level of anxiety and stress, on top of the fact that you are navigating the emotional and mental issues of yourself and, and of your children, and then the real world circumstances. Like I said, navigating the finances, making sure that there's a proper schedule that everyone can adhere to. Looking at the fact that you now have to learn new things quickly. Like I mentioned, that learning curve is so steep. It's hard to believe. It's almost like jumping off a cliff because what's happening is you are forced to become an expert quickly. I remember for me, like I said, cooking was one of the things I had to learn fast because I was spending an exorbitant amount of money eating out all the time. One day, my daughter, she comes to me, and like I said, and I'm going to tell this story tomorrow because this is an impactful story. But she came in and she was like, "Look, Daddy, I'm hungry." And she was 13, yeah, 13 at the time. And, you know, we were so used to eating out all the time. I was like, "Well, what do you want to eat? Where you want to go?" She said, "Daddy, I don't want any fast food." Now I'm sitting there and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, hold on a second. What 13-year-old kid doesn't want fast food? But she was sick of it. She was like, look, you gotta do. She said, "Daddy, you gotta learn how to cook. You gotta figure it out." And after some time we grappled, but you know what? It was really the greatest thing. Because see, here's something else that I want to talk to solo parents about. You acquire incredible skills, things that you never would have known. For instance, look, I'm bald, but I know how to do hair. I had two daughters. I had to learn how to do hair. You know, I had to learn how to navigate women, girls. You know, I couldn't come in hard all the time. I couldn't come in like the rocket launcher. I couldn't be the rock. I had to learn how to become a feather too, because my children needed to be able to talk to someone. And it wasn't about, sending them to a therapist, sending them to a counselor, you know, or sending them to a family member. Sometimes they had intimate things that they wanted to discuss and they weren't comfortable having that conversation with anyone but their father. I mean, normally they would have had that conversation with their mother, but the mother wasn't around. She passed. My wife passed. So what I'm saying is you learn some incredible skills when you're up against the wall. And all those skills that you learn, you had no idea that were going to be something that was going to be a major part of your life. Like, for instance, Now I love to cook. I cook every night. For me, it was healthier. I ended up cutting out things in my diet like eating pork meat and eating beef and finding out how to cook great recipes, use a lot of vegetables, things like that. Then it became a way for me to be able to bond better with my girls. See, me and my girls, we're foodies. So it got to the point where we would try to one up each other with a meal. Like my youngest daughter, she loves to cook. She's an incredible cook. My oldest daughter is an incredible cook. And the whole thing is like when we talk, it's like, what did you make? What'd you do? What's this? And we come together. But I had to figure out it was a way to be able to bond. Then of course I had to get my man on too, and I had to get them further acclimated to some things. I live in Texas. So of course, you know, I live in the gun state. Well, my girls now know how to take apart a gun, they know how to clean a gun, and they know how to shoot. I took them to the range. I spent some time, teaching them how to clean. I spent some time teaching them how to load weapons, how to, again. So for me as a man, guess what? I now know that my girls have confidence in protecting themselves. And again, I know that society at large may look at this different, crazy, but you know what? I had to find a way to be able to morph my relationship with my daughters. My daughters play soccer. You know, they played through our high school. Both of them were captains of the soccer team. My youngest one ended up getting a scholarship for playing soccer. I personally never, before my girls, I didn't watch women's soccer. But guess what? Now I watch the women's game religiously. I've learned how to function better dealing with cross-gender circumstances. I I had a one of my clients. She had a young son who wanted to play football. And of course, she didn't know how to get the cleats that her son needed. You know, she was able to reach out to someone to help her. But then she got involved with the football program. She started as a volunteer mom by simply saying, you know what? I'll make food, I'll make water bottles, I'll do these things. And her son appreciated that because, sure, she didn't know a lot about the game, but over time she learned. That season, she truly became a football mom. And you know what? Her son appreciated it. Sometimes you have to step outside of the box in order to build. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, because guess what? You have to understand this. Somebody else, they're not putting money in your pocket. They're not giving you the time back that you need. So their opinions truly don't matter. The only thing that matters is how you are going to navigate through dealing with this parental status that you're now on, one that you have been given. See, it's different than the other single parenting situations. In a divorce circumstance, at least one party, and maybe both, but at least one party is aware of the fact that they no longer want to be with you. In a solo parent situation, there is a pre-existing understanding that somebody's going to move a few states away so they could work, or maybe they're in the military, they have to go to another country. So they know that the reason why mommy or daddy is not here is because they're doing something else. In the solo parent situation, like I said before, you were not anticipating this happening, even if there was a sign of something occurring, like cancer or whatever, what have you. You know, you're never ready to truly manage the loss of that person. So now, like I said, you have to emotionally figure out how to stabilize yourself. And tomorrow's panel discussion is going to be great because I'm really going to have a great opportunity to speak to both Damon and Deanna Hurd. That's the couple that I was telling you about that found each other. Because I want to know how they got through those periods, those feelings, the feelings of guilt, the feelings of shame, the feelings of I don't want to cheat on my spouse, even though you're not. You know, if you're in a dedicated relationship, you don't want to feel like somebody else is interrupting that portion of your life. So I definitely can't wait to have the conversation with them to find out how they were able to manage through that. That's a true emotional challenge. And it's a hardship that a solo parent has to have a has to figure out how to navigate through. And then there's the all the mental challenges. Like I said, you you're under an extreme time constraint. You're facing some financial issues, baby. So the doors feel like they're closing in on you. The walls, rather, feel like they're closing in on you. And your anxiety's high. Your stress levels are up there. And again, this group doesn't have time for proper self care. So, to go to the gym, to do that's hard. This is where you have to start teaching yourself and working with your children and figuring out how to build a circumstance where everybody is dealing with their emotional situations. Maybe it's not going to the gym. Maybe it's going for a nature walk. Everybody getting together. Hey guys, you know what? Let's go up to the mountain range. Let's take a walk. Let's go swimming. See, all these things, you have to start thinking outside the box so that you and your children can navigate through managing their emotional and managing their mental. And also, you got to remember, You may not be in a financial situation to be able to afford therapists or counselors, but you can still reach out to key people that you can reach out to a local minister or a mosque or some. There are religious societies out there that offer services. Then also there are services in the community that people are offered. There are programs that you don't have to pay for or pay a reduced price. So there are ways to manage through these things, but you have to be that person that will agree to think out the box. For a moment, like I talked about earlier, there is a true adjustment period. It's going to take you time to navigate how to address and make things happen. My suggestion is that you don't press yourself. Realize that it's going to take time. Write down a list of all the areas that right now you're having a challenge in, and then slowly work on ways to be able to navigate through those challenges. Like I said, for me, it was cooking. I had to learn how to cook. Well, you know what I ended up doing? I spent 2 weeks watching cooking channel, watching YouTube videos, you know, learning different things. I went and I even got my wife's old recipe book. You have to think out the box. And again, that just happened to be me with cooking. I'm just saying, whatever you're doing, eh, you may have financial issues. Well, you know what? Maybe you might need to think about this fact. Are you working a job that you know is not going to take care of your needs? Well, then perhaps you need to look at a new occupation, or you need to step out on faith, take that risk, and look at entrepreneurialism. Look at meeting your situation. You might find that you are in a situation where you are going to surpass the what your spouse used to make or whatever, or you may have been a home parent and the breadwinner may have passed, and now you have to figure out how to navigate through, how to make the money, because guess what, life doesn't stop. As a matter of fact, when you are impacted, life speeds up. I hate to tell it like that, but it's true. So that means that what you're going to have to do is start thinking about different ways. Well, you might need to talk to people who are doing it right now, other entrepreneurs. You might need to look at businesses that may be able to use your services. See, remember, you can't just get another job because you got to figure out what's going on with the house. You have to manage the children. So, taking the societal approach of, I'll just get another job, that's not going to work for you. You're going to have to figure out how to find a way to work from home, maybe find a way to incorporate something that your children can, you know, can be involved in, or be able to find a way for you to be able to do something where your children can participate or be in the area without you having to, you know, manage or navigate them. It's all about thinking out the box. It's all about understanding that you, you're gonna, it's not fair what's happened to you. It's not fair that you lost the love of your life. The kids lost their parents. It's not fair that your life is having to change in such a rapid pace. But the reality is, although it's not fair, still has to be done. You still have to manage through. So that means that you're going to have to find a way to be okay with all of the craziness that is going on in your world. And then not only are you going to have to be okay with it, you're going to have to teach your children how to be okay with it. And having that conversation, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate it so that everyone is on the same page. Because the one thing you don't want is you don't want the rebel without a cause situation going on in your home. That's difficult to have to manage that kind of challenge, especially when you're already managing every other aspect. And you also have to be understanding children may act emotionally. Again, their brains are not fully coordinated. Their brains are not fully functional like that. So they're relying more on their emotions than their logic. You, as the parent, are going to have some self control, and you're going to have to find a way to bridge the gap so that you and your child can have understanding in your relationships. You know, it remember when both you and your significant other, your spouse, were together, one could manage one aspect while the other managed another. Now you're by yourself. You have to manage both. You have to learn how to function properly so that you're making sure that the children's needs are being met, that they're being emotionally addressed, that they're being mentally addressed, and that you, as that surviving spouse, the surviving parent, you are paying special attention to them. You're making sure that they are understanding that you, as the parent, are there for them. That's a big thing. So, again, thank you for seeing another episode of the Grief Empowerment Theory. And this will go into tomorrow's panel. Definitely see tomorrow's panel. You can go on my Facebook page, The Grief Empowerment Theory. You can check me on LinkedIn. The event is listed on LinkedIn. And it's also listed on YouTube. So you can get the links to see the events. Also on Instagram, you can go to my Instagram page, J Lewis at jlewis3.com. You know, and you can literally go to my LinkedIn So again, you have a couple of different ways to be able to uh, look for tomorrow's event. Tomorrow's event is going to be at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And like I said, it's on LinkedIn, it's on Facebook, it's on YouTube. So you'll be able to find it in any one of those areas. So understand that, again, there is a new term when it comes to single parenting. It's called solo parenting. And you're doing it on your own. It makes you become an incredible rock star once you learn how to manage through and master all the different challenges. You'll realize that you are actually doing things by yourself that some dual parents can't do. Give yourself credit where credit's due. And that's really the biggest part of solo parenting. Give yourself credit, give yourself time, and also understand that mistakes happen. You have a steep learning curve, but you are going to learn it. Again, thanks for coming to another episode of the Grief Empowerment Theory podcast. This is J. Lewis III. I will talk to you next Wednesday. Come to tomorrow's event. I've got 6 incredible experts who are going to be able to talk about different aspects of solo parenting. So, thank you again. Have a good one, everyone.